All right, welcome back. We're starting into the digestive system now. This is going to be an overview and just throwing in just a couple of pathologies too. So the upper GI tract, we're just going to talk about a few of the structures, some salivary glands, pathologies related to the upper GI tract. And then as an overview, I want to go through the macronutrient absorption of carbohydrates, lipids, and proteins, those three major groups. Okay, throughout this system, a lot can go wrong. And you can see by this image, all the things that can happen with the GI tract. So the first case is in a low resource setting, a patient that I saw when traveling. It's an 8-month-old child. She has an abscess under her mandible there on the left. First question, name the structure that is likely causing this abscess. Is it her tongue, her tooth, or a salivary gland? So the answer is one of her salivary glands. So at 8 months, a tooth is not coming in that location quite yet. Tongue is highly unlikely. So it's within this submandibular gland. You got 3 pairs of salivary glands, the parotid, submandibular, and the sublingual. Okay, so let's go on to the operating room. A 19-year-old patient is having a tonsillectomy. It's an outpatient procedure, and he comes back the next day complaining that he feels something stuck in his throat. So you look into his mouth and you see this. What do you think that is? Is it an abscess on the tongue, a hematoma on the uvula, or a red jelly belly? The answer, this is a hematoma on the uvula. The uvula is a really sensitive little structure that kind of dangles down there. It's certainly not something you absolutely have to have. People actually have it removed if it's part of their sleep apnea problem. But it can get injured very easily with these Yankar suctions. So with a tonsillectomy, a lot of times happens is there's aggressive suctioning, not only in the operating room, but in the recovery room before the patient is like totally awake, because there might be more bleeding, salivation, so they want to suck it out. So they'll take a Yankar suction, and instead of putting into the mouth on either side of the mouth, they put it in straight in the middle towards the back. And that increases the risk for having this uvula hematoma. All right, so let's go down a little bit further. Let's talk about metabolism now and the biochemical reactions that are part of metabolism. So metabolism basically is broken down into 2 categories: catabolism, which is the breaking down or digestion. So proteins broken down into amino acids, for example. And then the anabolism is where things get reformatted, or their parts get used to make a different product using their broken down products from catabolism. So an example is creating the hormone insulin. So amino acids are used to make insulin. But let's start breaking down carbohydrates first. And the way I remember catabolism is a cat ripping to shreds these molecules. So the first scenario, you woke up late, you need to get to the gym before classes. For quick energy, you grab a chocolate bar. So which structure secretes amylase, the enzyme that will break down the candy bar? Is it a salivary gland, the pancreas, or both? The answer is it's both. The amylase enzyme is secreted by the salivary glands as well as the pancreas. So you start getting your glucose absorption early on. And the way I remember amylase is a student I had in class, name was Amy, and every day in class she'd bring a bag of candy and work on her candy during class. So I always called her Sweet Amy. That amylase enzyme starts breaking down those carbohydrates. So shifting down to the pancreas, amylase is taking over as well to help with the breakdown of the carbohydrates. So the pancreas has two different jobs. It has an endocrine job, and it also has this exocrine as its side job. And the digestive enzymes that are excreted by the pancreas include amylase, or Sweet Amy, lipase, which breaks down lipids or fats, and protease breaks down proteins. So carbohydrates get absorbed pretty quickly into the bloodstream. This is showing a depiction of the GI tract getting through those villi directly into the bloodstream. So carbohydrates get broken down pretty quick, get in easy access into the bloodstream. Which of your macronutrients does not? The fats or lipids or the proteins? The answer is your fats / lipids have a longer way of getting into the bloodstream. So we're going into the catabolism of fats. We went through this just a little bit from the discussion in the lymphatic system. So the catabolism of fats. So the breakdown of fats is a cycle of breaking down first, then it has to get into the lymphatic system, and the lymphatic system take it to the circulatory system until finally those broken down products get to the liver for reformatting. So in the duodenum, the lipids are reduced to free fatty acids and monoglycerides. And then when those fatty acids get to the jejunum and ileum, they start getting absorbed into lymphatics. And within the villi are these little lacteals. This is part of the lymphatic system. So these tiny emulsion free fatty acids broken down from bile and lipase from the pancreas get absorbed into the lymphatics. And then from the lymphatics goes into the thoracic duct, which makes its way into the venous circulation and finally into the liver. Okay, so next medical scenario, you're headed to your afternoon anatomy lab and you're feeling kind of tired. So you grab a Snickers bar for quick energy. So you say you're eating the candy bar for quick energy, but what is exactly giving you the energy? Is it glucose or is it ATP? And the answer is it's ATP. ATP is relatively unstable compound, so it needs that precursor glucose. So ATP is actually your energy source. This is a depiction of a cell, and cell is needed to make ATP. And in order to do that, you also need oxygen. So that's why it's so desperately important for oxygen to get to cells for this cellular metabolism. So glucose combined with oxygen forms ATP, and CO2 is your byproduct, and you breathe that off. So this is cellular respiration. So glucose is needed to make ATP. ATP is the chemical energy source to drive cellular metabolism. So this is showing how ATP is used to, for example, the sodium potassium pump. So all of this is used for nerve cell signaling, heart contractions, kidney functions, everything. And notice how water has to be in the presence of ATP to actually utilize the ATP. So it's no wonder that you feel so tired and depleted when you're dehydrated. Okay, let's go on to death. So with death, ATP is not being generated. So what causes the rigor mortis? Is it that you're unable to release actin and myelin bridge, or unable to initiate the actin-myelin bridge in the muscle fibers? The answer is you're unable to release this actin-myelin bridge.
Toward the center of the cycle. ATP then binds again to myosin and it detaches from actin. ATP breaks down into ADP and phosphate, and the myosin head comes. Myosin heads continue to deactivate later.
Okay, as I'm watching some of these, as I'm watching this video and the replay of it, I know there's a lot of words that are not being transcribed correctly. But let me go over this again. So this is the actin-myelin bridge that creates this muscle contraction. All right, so let's go on to the next question. What hormone is needed to get glucose into the body cells? Is it insulin or is it glucagon? The answer is insulin is needed to get glucose into the body cells in order for normal cellular metabolism. Glucose entry into cells is actually a two-step process. The first step is needing the hormone insulin. And each cell has an insulin receptor and a glucose channel. The second step is having this channel open for glucose to enter into cells. So the first step is insulin, kind of like a lock and key. The insulin is needed as the key. It unlocks the receptors and glucose is allowed entry. So which type of diabetes still produces insulin, but the receptors have become resistant, where this channel is locked? Type 1 or type 2? The answer is type 2. I remember type 2 because it's the second step of getting glucose into cells. So type 2 diabetes is when the second step goes bad and glucose cannot enter the cell. This is a depiction showing both types of diabetes. The upper depiction is showing how type 1 diabetes is producing little or no insulin at all. The pancreas is pretty much shut down. And so there's no insulin to open the lock to allow glucose to get into the cells. In the second type 2 diabetes, there's lots of insulin, but the receptor sites have become resistant. So over on this side. In both situations, there is elevated blood glucose, but for different reasons. And we'll get, by the way, we'll get into a lot more about type 1, type 2 diabetes when we get into the pancreas. But let's go on to protein metabolism now. Catabolism and anabolism. So the breaking down products, the breaking down of those products shown in the image, eggs, fish, ham, and then the anabolism, where it's the rebuilding using the products of the proteins. All right, so which macronutrient do you need to make insulin? We're making the hormone insulin. Is it protein, lipids, or carbohydrates? And the answer is protein. So you need protein to make insulin. Insulin gets glucose into your cells, and then energy in the form of ATP is released. In the stomach, your proteins is broken down into small peptides by the enzyme pepsin and hydrochloric acid. So your stomach, in order to digest proteins, it needs to be acidic relative to the rest of your body. And then as it gets broken down into smaller peptides, it gets passed on into the duodenum, where the enzyme protease from the pancreas breaks it down into these smaller amino acids. So the pancreas is our superstar, releases the enzyme protease. And in order for protease to work, it has to be neutral pH. So the exocrine side of the pancreas releases bicarb to neutralize the acid, and then it allows these peptides to be broken down into amino acids. So if you look at this pancreas, it's showing the endocrine side of the system. These are the islet cells, and they have direct access to the bloodstream. And the acinar cells, or acinar cells, and they are giving rise to the exocrine system. Okay, so we said protein is needed to build insulin out of amino acids. And what do you need to eat to release insulin? Proteins, lipids, or carbohydrates? The answer, you need carbohydrates to release insulin. So there is the pancreas, our superstar. And we will get into this organ in an upcoming lecture, digestive system. So the endocrine side of the pancreas is that glucose regulation, releasing insulin. The exocrine side are the digestive enzymes of amylase, protease, and lipase. So in summary, we went through the upper GI tract, the salivary glands, where the breakdown of carbohydrates begins. Lipid digestion requiring the lymphatic system. And protein digestion, which starts in the stomach, requiring an acidic environment. And then on to the duodenum, where it needs the neutral pH and the enzyme protease to create amino acids. And this is a summary slide. And if you want to look at it in more detail, you can download the PDF, excuse me, the PDF. There's PDF link in the YouTube discussion. And it goes through all the different phases of what happens throughout the digestive system. And this is a visible body that just gives you a visual imagery of digestive system in general.
Peristaltic waves propel chyme through the pyloric sphincter into the duodenum of the small intestine. Finger-like projections called villi line the interior wall of the small intestine. Most absorption of nutrients from ingested food occurs through these. In the small intestine, nutrients in the chyme are further broken down by secretions from organs. Inside each villus are lacteals of the lymphatic system that fatty acids pass into, and capillary beds of the circulatory system into which other nutrients pass. Water and other substances from chyme that are not absorbed move into the large intestine for further absorption, digestion, or elimination.
Okay, so this is a cartoon that just shows, in a nutshell, the digestive system. And that is the end of this presentation. Please leave comments, questions, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks.